All right. And we are live. Hello, everybody. Happy Friday night to all of you. Hope you're doing well. There is so much to discuss. We're going to get to a handful of big stories this week. As always, you know the drill. You can support this channel by going to patreon.com/Hemet. You can leave a super chat. We will get to them in between stories as we're doing this. And as always, I have Den, who is in the comments, who is helping moderate things. And if you have any questions, he'll make sure that I see all the important stuff in between stories as well. So thank you to Den for helping out with that. And I think the first story I wanted to get started with, let me pull this up here. Um, yeah, leave all your comments. We'll get to as many as we can. First story I wanted to talk about is Oklahoma, because that is a state that by some estimates is ranked the worst in the nation when it comes to education. And Governor Kevin Stitt just signed into law this week a new bill that is supposed to help students, I guess, improve their education somehow. And what the bill does is it gives public school students permission to ditch class in order to go to a local church and learn about the Bible. Um, and basically, let me show you this bill that he just signed into law, because if you read through this thing, it gets crazier and crazier. I'm not going to read through the whole thing. It's like 4 pages long. But this is something I want you to get used to, this term right here, released time course. This is what they just passed. It's a bill to create a released time course, which means they can be excused from school to attend a course in religious or moral instruction taught by some third party outside the school. And what's interesting about these types of released time studies is that, at least in this case, in Oklahoma, it would allow students to be excused up to 3 times a week. That's 125 classes a year in order to attend moral or religious instruction. Schools would also have to give students elective credit for these courses, even though there's no curriculum, and even though the courses may not be taught by licensed or certified teachers, and even though the school is not vetting these classes, they would still have to give students credit, which seems to cheapen the value of their diploma. That seems weird. But what is this in reality? Because release time, all that language, what is it? It's a chance for students to skip class to go to Bible study. That's what this is all about. That's what everyone supporting this bill knows it's about. And there's nothing even that requires those Bible classes to be academically rigorous in any way. We can have a whole separate discussion about students who take an elective to learn about the Bible as literature, because there is a good argument to be made that if you're a good student and you want to understand classical literature and references in pop culture, there's a lot of value in learning certain parts of the Bible. Like, if you don't know anything about the book of Genesis, the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve, Noah's Ark, you're going to miss out on a lot of references people make in books, in writing, etc. Yeah, in writing and song lyrics, things like that. So there is value to that, but it has to be taught objectively. That is not what we are talking about here. These are straight up Sunday school classes that are taught during the school day. Now, there are some secular safeguards in place, in theory, in this bill, because they don't want to say it's Bible study. So what they say is that these classes are taught by outside organizations. Parents have to opt in to whether their kids are able to participate. No school funds can be used for any of this. The schools cannot promote any of this using their social media, their emails, etc. For example, if students are told, like, well, they're taking the released time class at a local church, well, how are they going to get from their public school to the church? Well, the church would have to provide the buses, transport those kids to the church, and then bring them back for their next class or something like that. So the school's not on the hook to pay for the buses or anything. Students would also have to make up any missed assignments. And they also cannot skip certain required core classes like English or math. And that's why theoretically this is all legal. It's actually legal across the country, but a handful of states have kind of reinforced the fact that it's legal through bills like this one. And it's a Christian nationalist dream come true. And you can tell why, because who can afford to put together a curriculum and hire a teacher and pay for buses for stuff like this? Usually evangelical megachurches, Catholic churches, people like that, not religious minorities, that's for damn sure. So the problems with all of this, though, are kind of obvious. Because if you skip class for these church lessons, even if, I mean, especially if you are leaving at the same time every week or a couple times a week, you're probably going to be academically behind your classmates in whatever class you are skipping because, not being in class is not ever going to be as good as being in class and knowing what the teacher wants you to know. If you're skipping an elective too, that's also true, just as it would be true if you're skipping math class. It also makes life harder for the teachers whose classes you are skipping as a student. I mean, every teacher knows, especially in high school, for example, let's say an English teacher wanted to take kids on a field trip to go see a play. There's value to that. I get that. But if I was a math teacher and half my class was gone, you know what that means? That means I can't really teach my lesson because I'm going to have to reteach it anyway. So it messes with my schedule, even though the field trip has nothing to do with me. And so if these kids are skipping 3 days a week to go to church, like if you're a music teacher, an art teacher, even a gym teacher, you're going to be stifled in what you can do with the kids who remain. So that's another problem. And while students can't skip core classes, but they can skip art or music or some elective, it implies that those subjects and those teachers who teach them are not nearly as important for students' development. And I think that's unfair as well. I want students to get those elective classes. That stuff is meaningful and useful. Like, it's not just all STEM all the time? And also, if churches are looking for ways to indoctrinate kids, they already have a way to do that. It's called church. They don't need to take up your school day to do it. And then there's the peer pressure. Because what happens if you live in a state like Oklahoma that is already overwhelmingly Christian? If your friends are taking this Bible class and not just going to it, but saying, hey, we get prizes and candy while we're there, which is a thing they have done in other states, what do you think is going to happen? All those other kids, the kids whose parents may not want them to attend, are going to be like, Mom, Dad, I want to go. Sign the paperwork because I want to get candy and prizes. And none of that is illegal, but you could see how that puts a strain on religious minorities as well. Because at some point, it is entirely possible you are left with a classroom at the public school of like all the Jews, all the Muslims, all the atheists, because their Christian classmates have now gone off to church. In 2020, Tennessee passed a law exactly like this, letting kids out of class. And it required public schools to allow these programs to exist. But in their version of the law, kids could skip 180 hours per year. That's 22.5 full days of instruction in the classroom just gone. And Tennessee is another state where it's like, I don't think those kids can afford to miss that much public school. It's not like they were starting from the top of the academic pile in the whole state, generally speaking, to begin with. Now, if you've heard of anything like this, any of these programs, you've probably heard of the Christian ministry that's kind of at the center of all of this, and it's called LifeWise Academy. And I'm going to show you the front page of their website because they're bragging about how they're getting away with this. This is LifeWise Academy. Look at that. This is their front page. This is what you see when you just go to the front. Every week, tens of thousands of public school students legally attend LifeWise Bible classes during school hours. All caps. That's the point. Like, and they just show you, like, everyone covers us. Look, Fox, CBN, NBC covered them. It wasn't praising them, but that doesn't matter. How is this possible? Because Christian nationalists are in charge of these governments. That's how it's possible. I do want to go back to that NBC News thing for just a second. But basically, LifeWise, what does this company even do? What does this ministry do? They offer their courses to all these states. They will take care of the curriculum and the staffing and the background checks. Like, they'll handle all of it. All you got to do is make sure you can find a local chapter, which is usually some church near a public school, who will tap into this network for use in their own public school districts. So, according to NBC News, they wrote about this back in April, I believe. This is an article from NBC News. When LifeWise launched in 2018, the initial goal was to serve 25 schools by 2025, but it surpassed that long ago. By the start of this year, 2024, LifeWise had set up chapters in more than 300 schools in a dozen states, teaching 35,000 public school students weekly Bible lessons that are usually scheduled to coincide with lunch or non-core classes such as library, art, or gym class. That is what's scary about this. They have grown rapidly. And while church-state separation is supposed to be maintained in theory, that's just not what happens in reality. Here's another thing from that same article. Opponents have also documented several instances of teachers and administrators promoting LifeWise to students, either by allowing LifeWise volunteers to visit classrooms, hosting school-wide assemblies, or advertising the program in paperwork sent home to parents. You can't do any of that stuff. That is advertising a church, more or less. You know, that's the problem with this organization. They know exactly what they're doing. And in Oklahoma, you know, where there is so many options for students who are Christians to go to church, they're now trying to take a chunk out of the school day to do it as well. I want to show you one other thing about this. Look at the results. This bill passed in the Oklahoma State Senate 38-7. Look what happened in the Oklahoma State House this week. They had the fourth reading. It's been through some changes, but this is the part I want to show you. The vote was 51-40. Can you see that? Yeah, you could see that. It was 51-40. All the Democrats voted against it. All 15 of them voted against it. But look at the Republicans. 51 voted for it. 25 voted against it. There is like a third of Republican House members in Oklahoma said, maybe this is a bad idea. And it passed. But the fact that that many Republicans voted against it sends a message that, like, this is not universally beloved here. Now, why would that have happened? Why would so many Republicans oppose this bill? Well, for one, it's because time-released programs are already legal due to a Supreme Court ruling from forever ago. So you don't need this bill to do the thing they want to do. Everyone is well aware that the only reason you pass a bill like this is to send a giant message to Christians. Hey, did you know it's legal to pull your kids out of public school to take Bible classes? Like, it was legal, but this is getting media coverage, so now they know about it. So that's one thing. You don't need a bill like this. It's symbolic. And depending on how these released time classes go, the Republicans said it could also lead to lawsuits. Because what happens if you say yes to one church to do a release time program, but no to another group? Maybe that group sues. You're basically creating new administrative hurdles that public schools are going to have to navigate around. And if they screw up in any way, it now puts them in trouble too. Why would you want them to just have to learn a whole new thing that is unnecessary when the only thing that could come out of it is like lawsuits? There's no reason for that. One Democrat pointed out it's not going to help students do better in school because you're literally taking up instructional time. Why not let families handle moral and religious instruction while letting public schools focus on academics? Like, there are lots of good reasons to be against this bill. And maybe the most telling thing about all this is that LifeWise was asked. This was also quoted by NBC News. People were asking LifeWise, hey, we like your curriculum. We want our kids to get Bible education, but we don't want them to skip school to do it. So will you offer these classes before school or after school? Guess what LifeWise said about that? This is also from NBC News here. Check this out. LifeWise has rejected requests by some school districts to schedule the program before or after school, the approach favored by most other religious clubs, because one of their people said it would make it less accessible. That's a lie. That's not the reason they're not offering it before after school. They're not offering it before after school because their whole thing is we hate public schools. We want to pull kids out of them. They don't want to be something you do in addition to public school. They want to be something you do in as a replacement for public school. Because the thing about Christian nationalism is they really dislike public education. They think public education is some liberal conspiracy where, like, you learn how to be a furry or something like that. That's why they don't like them. They think it's too accommodating to LGBTQ students, and you're learning woke things like black people exist and it wasn't pleasant for a long part of American history. They don't like any of that. So they want to pull kids out of school, not offer Bible classes after school. You think the Bible counts after 3:30 p.m.? No, thank you. They want to take you at like 1 o'clock when you're wide awake, just had lunch, and now you could skip a class, probably art class, those liberal commies. That's why they want to do this during school. That's the whole thing. Again, go back to LifeWise's website. They were not like, look at how happy they are about offering their stuff during school hours. They are not interested in teaching your kids about the Bible after school. They shut down after school. So this is the bill that passed. It was in front of Governor Kevin Stitt. He signed it because he's a Christian nationalist as well. But in the weeks prior to this happening, and everyone knew this was going to get passed because it's Oklahoma. What do you expect? Guess who chimed in? The Satanic Temple. And they said, if you pass this bill, we are ready to go. I want to show you this Facebook post they made at the end of May. The Satanic Temple's Hellion Academy of Independent Learning, hail Satan, could soon be available in Oklahoma. I'm going to scroll down here. The Satanic Temple believes that public schools should be free from religious influence. We are, however, prepared to ensure our members' children receive the same opportunities as those participating in other religions' programs. By not vetoing this bill, Governor Stitt will allow the state to grant elective credit for religious and morality classes taught by the Satanic Temple, making it possible for parents to invite the Satanic Temple's Hail program to their local public schools as soon as this fall. Will Governor Stitt make history by being the first to award school credit for classes taught by the Satanic Temple? We will find out shortly. I just want to point you to one other thing here. Look at this adorable logo. Look at that. Look at that. It's cute. So Governor Stitt has now passed this bill. Ball's in the Satanic Temple's court in terms of whether or not they will actually go through with their classes. Now, and I should say, there is a big difference between saying we're going to offer classes and parents opting in to make sure their kids can go to those classes. But the Satanic Temple does have a track record of success here. I spoke with June Everett, who is their campaign director for Hale, and she told me they've already completed their second year of doing this in Pennsylvania, and that, yeah, quote, parents were excited to send their children to Hale. Get it? Get it? They were excited to send their children to Hale. She also said those parents were not like all atheists. A lot of them just didn't align with Christian nationalism. Maybe they were religious parents, but they didn't like Christian indoctrination. And they knew that what these classes, like what do you do in a Satanic Temple class? Well, they said we teach kids about the 7 fundamental tenets, which include things like be nice to your neighbors. Think charitably about how you interact with other people, things like that. It's very similar to what the Satanic Temple does with their after-school Satan programs. It's very similar to that. And the thing is, like, I can totally see why religious parents who don't want their kids to be indoctrinated by conservative Christians might say, you know what, if all your classmates are leaving school, I'm going to send you to the Satanic one because they seem nice and friendly and it's secular, but it's also teaching you good lessons. And guess what? If the Satanists can create a more memorable, entertaining experience for kids where you can learn art and music and PE, who knows, and other subjects that are more useful than anything you'll learn in the Bible, maybe the peer pressure works in the other direction where all these kids come back from Hail class and they're like, it was amazing. We did all this stuff. Look at my little plush doll with the baby Baphomet or something. Now, I will tell you the last thing I will say here. In Oklahoma, their superintendent of public instruction is this guy, Ryan Walters, who is basically a wannabe secretary of education who is fully on board with MAGA everything. So he said like a month ago, there will be no Satanists in Oklahoma schools. And he said that in response to Oklahoma's chaplaincy bill, where they were going to allow Christian chaplains into public schools to do the work of like trained social workers. And that's a horrible idea for reasons I've talked about on this show before. And he can't do that. He can't say, yeah, we're allowing religious chaplains, and then say, yeah, but not your religion. Well, guess what he did today? He just issued a statement now that Kevin Stitt signed this bill saying that he doesn't want these Hail classes to go on either. Let me play you. It's about a minute long. This is what Ryan Walters said today.
We just put in place a new bill, HB 1425. Here's what this bill does. It allows students during the day in high school to go to a church, receive religious or moral study, and get credit for it. We want to encourage our kids to freely express their religious beliefs. And so we're very excited about this piece of legislation. Well, we've now had the Satanists come in and say they're going to offer courses too and get credit for it. So I'm just going to clear this up. No, the Satanists are not coming into our schools. No, Satanism is not a religion. They will not be recognized by our State Department of Education. You are not a religion, Satanist. I know that you guys like lying, and that's a central part of your belief system there. But you will not be participating with our schools. You will not be allowed in our schools, nor will you receive credit.
I mean, sometimes when you file a lawsuit against something that's clearly unconstitutional, you have to find some proof that there is religious discrimination happening. And sometimes guys like Ryan Walters literally tell you how they're going to discriminate against you. And it's just so clear cut. So I hope here's what has to happen now that the bill is signed. The Satanic Temple, or maybe some atheist groups somewhere, has to say, we are offering a course that students can take, and we are covering the costs of transporting them and doing all this stuff. And they have to go to a public school district and say it's offered. And parents have to be given that option, that this is an option for your kids. And then Ryan Walters has to actually try to stop them. And if he does, that would be a lawsuit. Inevitably, that would be a lawsuit. And he's telling us exactly why. Because he's not interested in religious freedom. He's interested in Christian supremacy. He wants a theocracy. That's why he can't pull that off. But he's dumb enough to say it out loud. So it's not a lawsuit yet, because you need to have him stop the Satanists from doing this. He hasn't done that yet. Right now, he's just all talk. But you could see where this is heading. It could be very entertaining, or it could be a lawsuit waiting to happen, and Ryan Walters should lose. We'll see. I'm going to pause there. I'll take questions. What do we got right now? Would a humanist club organization qualify as a religious freedom course too? Or is that specifically too secular to qualify for First Amendment protections? My understanding is that if a humanist group, an atheist group, what have you, if they said, hey, we want to teach humanism, and I don't even know what they would have to submit in order to offer themselves up as a course. But if they said, we want to teach humanism, and for anyone's sake, I hope they actually mean that and they actually have a course planned out, which a lot of places do. Unitarian churches do that a lot too. Yeah, that would absolutely be allowed. And that's the whole point. I would love to see a Muslim organization or a Jewish organization say, yeah, well, we're going to play this game as well. Let's see Ryan Walters try to stop any of these groups from doing it. So they're all able to offer their classes. The question is, will any parents actually sign up for it? And if that is the case, are state officials actually going to go through in stopping any of them from meeting? Because there's no way they're dumb enough to do that. Ryan Walters gets attention because he says a lot of crazy MAGA shit, but that's different from actually doing the stuff. And in this case, he hasn't done it yet. So we'll see. Running a school system like that will make it so those students won't qualify for college. I mean, if they were skipping core classes, I absolutely agree. But even skipping electives, even if this doesn't affect whether or not they get into college, think about the message it sends. Like, oh, you don't need music class. You can skip art class. Go learn about why the earth is flat or whatever shit biblical literalists believe. Yeah, the earth is 6 days. Go to science class and learn how the world actually, how organisms came to evolve. And then go to Bible class and learn that your science teacher is lying to you. Like, ultimately, if I'm a college admissions officer and I see that a kid is skipping class to go learn about the Bible, I know I would think twice about giving that kid an acceptance letter. That's also true if they were teaching intelligent design in a school instead of evolution. You're not ready to handle the rigor of college. So it doesn't help students, is the point. What are they learning in a Bible class during the middle of the school day that they couldn't learn Sunday instead? It could backfire on them. I remember my first exposure to religion was when I was a kid and went to Bible camp with the friend I wanted to hang out with. I came out thinking it was all bonkers. Yeah, I mean, there is a possibility that a lot of these kids go to these life-wise Bible seminars and they just treat it as a chance to hang out with their friends, and none of them are learning anything, and they don't care because they're not getting a grade on it, and it's just a little party for them in the middle of the school day. Um, and yeah, maybe some kids come out of that thinking, all right, this whatever they're teaching us is insane. That's possible too. But also it's a waste. It just creates a new distraction at their school. They're not learning when they could be learning. I don't love that either. But yeah, that is a possibility that this all backfires because nothing turns people into atheists more than actually reading the Bible and learning about the crazy stuff it says. Dude, it's been legal to pull your kid out of school for religious events as long as I can remember in my area anyways. Yeah, it's true nationwide, which is the whole point. Like, I think I don't know this off the top of my head. The Supreme Court case that said you're allowed to remove your kid from a public school with some restrictions for religious education, that has been true since like the 1950s, maybe earlier. I'm not sure. But like, yeah, it is legal. And that's the whole point. Why are we passing bills like this? It's because a lot of people don't know it's legal and they want to pull kids out of public school. So, yeah, I mean, it has always been legal. It is legal. That's why some of those Republicans voted against this bill because you don't need it and it creates more problems than it solves. Less accessible? Good. It should be extracurricular, not in place of actual schooling. Yeah, I'm with you. It should be extracurricular. I don't care if parents want to send their kids to a class like this outside of the school day, but to take them out of school to do this, I mean, just shows you how much they don't value a real education. Scary thing is that the current SCOTUS may actually side with Oklahoma now. Well, let me correct a little of that. There's nothing to side with Oklahoma about in terms of allowing this program to go on because it's already illegal, like I said. Now, if Ryan Walters or someone like that, if Oklahoma officials say Christian groups are allowed to do this, non-Christian groups are not, is that something SCOTUS would get behind? Honestly, it strikes me as too far even for them because it's almost too blatantly discriminatory and they like slightly more subtlety when they're trying to dismantle the Constitution, but you never know. Pop quiz time. What action should you already have taken? Answer: Yes, like and subscribe and go to friendlyatheist.com. Thanks, Dad. Let's go to a different story, and I'll take more questions after that next one. Let me pull this up. Let's talk about this. Pop quiz for real. If I asked you, what is the biggest church state separation problem facing the country right now, what do you think it would be? I think there are some people who might say it's the crazy things said by Mike Johnson or Lauren Boebert in the name of Jesus, like crazy Republicans saying crazy things. Maybe you say it's attempts to shove the 10 Commandments into courthouses or get Christian chaplains into public schools. I think the answer is actually way more under the radar. It's not as overtly Christian nationalistic as that, and that's partly why it's such a big problem. My response to that question would be vouchers. It's the fact that a number of states are taking money that should be going to public schools and they're shifting them away from public schools and into private schools. And private schools are almost always religious schools, and religious schools are almost always Christian schools. Basically, a lot of states are using taxpayer dollars to fund religious indoctrination. And the Washington Post this week ran a really big article talking about this problem. It was written by their reporters Laura Meckler and Michelle Borstein. And basically, let me show you some of these statistics that they pointed out here. Billions in taxpayer dollars are being used to pay tuition at religious schools throughout the country as state voucher programs expand dramatically and the line separating public education and religion fades. Look at some of these numbers here. I know I'm skipping through the article, but like some of these states are offering up to $16,000 per student per year. And that stuff adds up. In just 5 states with these programs, more than 700,000 students benefited from vouchers this school year. The program, popular with conservatives, are rapidly growing in GOP-run states, with a total of 29 states plus DC operating some sort of voucher system. Look at this map, too. I'll leave this up for a bit. These are states that have voucher programs. I'll remove myself so you can see it. But you can see, like, there are a lot of states, and they're not all just red states, that have universal or near universal vouchers. A bunch of the lighter blue states here that are smaller voucher programs, and some states, I'm surprised to see Texas on there, frankly, right now anyway, that don't have voucher programs at all. But again, all of these states are saying, oh, you parents, you want to send your kid to a private religious school? Let us help you do it by stealing money that should be going to public schools. And they do this in the name of school choice. That's the buzzword. But like, according to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, which is a nonprofit group that talks about this stuff, they say, let me show you this, at least 1 in 3 states are considering or have enacted school voucher expansions alongside broad untargeted property tax cuts. And research suggests property tax cuts result in disproportionately less funding for districts serving large numbers of students of color. And just to summarize what they're saying here, in places where they're taking money out of public schools and siphoning them and giving them to private schools, that hurts communities that are not very wealthy. That hurts communities that have large populations of people of color. And that's a big problem with all of this. It makes the public schools in those communities worse. And those schools were already underfunded and under-resourced to begin with. And if you hurt the public schools, what does that do down the line? It hurts the very communities where they are located. That's what vouchers are doing. Back to that Washington Post article for a second. Look at what they did in Ohio this past year, where they made it, where they did a lot with vouchers. Here we go. More than 150,000 students are paying tuition with vouchers this year. When vouchers for students with autism and other disabilities who typically seek specific services are removed from the list, the portion going toward religious education rose to 98%. Virtually all of the money, taxpayer dollars, that could be used for vouchers were going towards religious education when you took out disabilities and students using it for that reason. That's insane. There was one part of this. I'm going to scroll down for a second here. Oops, I lie. I'll come back to that in a second. But I think elsewhere in the article, it said that at some schools, as many as 80% of the students who attend these private religious schools were attending because of vouchers. There was a Catholic school in Cincinnati that has like 1,300 students. 1,100 of them got taxpayer funded vouchers. In Arizona, this is another thing this Washington Post article noted. They've also been big on vouchers. Last year, 3/4 of the money, about almost $250 million, went to 184 vendors. Most of that money went for tuition, 87% of it to religious schools. And it gets worse in Arizona, especially. Check this out. In Arizona, the cost of universal vouchers has exceeded the $624 million budgeted for the year, contributing to a budget hole that lawmakers have no clue how to fill. That budget crunch could affect public school spending and certainly makes any increases unlikely at a time when public schools are struggling. Arizona schools are not able to pay for teacher pay raises or desperately needed resources. You just have teachers begging for copy paper and markers. It's so bad. This is robbing our local public schools and our most vulnerable students. And this is the problem when you underfund public schools. Teachers who are qualified don't want to teach at them because they don't have the resources they need. The money that could be used to improve those schools is gone. And here's the other thing. All of this, again, is done in the name of school choice, that parents have the right to choose the best education for their children. And if that happens to be a religious school, so be it. The problem is that a lot of the students getting this money, they were already attending private schools. Their parents were already paying private school tuition. But now that the state's offering voucher money, those same already well-off parents are like, oh yeah, sure, I'll take some of that voucher money and I'll keep sending my kid to this private school that we were already going to pay for. Why not? Like, the rich just get richer. And in addition to that, the public schools then miss out. That's especially concerning because public schools are for everyone by definition, while private schools could reject students with special needs, students who have same-sex parents, students who may need additional help because they have some disability, etc. So this is why, and in Arizona, by the way, Republicans have a slim majority in the House and the Senate, and yet they're able to do all of this stuff that hurts the entire state. In states where Republicans control the legislature, this is becoming a financial problem as well as an ethical one for all the reasons I just mentioned. Now, you could make an argument that vouchers are allowing some parents to send their kids to an overwhelmingly white private school instead of a more integrated public school. And if you don't believe me about that, where do you think the idea of school choice even came from? Like, the whole history of school choice was when Brown v. Board of Education was decided in the 1950s. A lot of parents were like, I don't want to send my kid to a school with African-American children. Let me just send them to a private religious school so they don't have to deal with that. That's the origins of school choice. And it's exactly what the outcome is going to be as more people use vouchers too. So why is all of this happening? Why are vouchers getting so popular now of all times? Part of the reason, you can blame the Supreme Court for this. In 2020, the right-wing Supreme Court ruled on a case, it was called Espinoza v. Montana Department of Revenue. And basically what they said is that taxpayer funding could subsidize private religious education. If states like Montana offered funding for private schools at all, they may also have to extend that funding to private religious schools. It depended on the kind of funding we were talking about. But it really hit the fan a couple years later in a case involving the state of Maine. And I have talked about this before, but here's the story behind what happened in Maine and why all of this really exploded. In Maine, students are guaranteed, like by the state constitution, they are guaranteed a free public education until they graduate high school, which sounds right and decent and great. But in some rural parts of Maine, and there are a lot of those, there are no local public schools. So students have the option of attending a private school on the state's dime, assuming they were accepted into those schools. State law, however, mandated that those schools have to be secular because you can't have taxpayer money paying tuition at a religious school, obviously. Well, right-wing groups then sued the state of Maine saying, you're discriminating against us as Christians. And the Supreme Court in 2022 said, yeah, they are. So John Roberts said Maine's breaking the law by not allowing taxpayer dollars to go to private religious schools. If you give money to private schools for any reason, you got to be able to give it to religious schools as well. So that's kind of what's happening with vouchers now, because all these states have green lights to say, oh, we were trying to help students who may have to go to a private school for whatever reason. And that just opened the floodgates to parents who can afford it saying, well, I want to send my kid to a private school that's religious and teaches creationism. And now they're getting tax dollars to do it because their states are saying, yeah, we'll give you the money to do it. And it hurts public education and it hurts those students and it ruins the state, because if you don't have a good public education system, you're not helping out your state either. So what used to be a straightforward application of church-state separation has basically been twisted into an argument of religious discrimination, which this wasn't. Like, I think I saw one commenter put it this way: forget separation of church and state. This is saturation of church and state. And the conservative Christians and Catholics who constantly complain about being persecuted, they now have the most powerful people in the country giving them legal justification to take money from public schools to enrich themselves and misinform students. And at the same time, they are hurting the most vulnerable people in the state. So taxpayers in half the country now are funding creationism, homophobia, anti-trans misinformation. It's all Sunday school masquerading as actual history and science. And by the way, I know we talked about Oklahoma for the last story. Oklahoma just went a step further, thanks to Ryan Walters. They just decided to open a publicly funded charter school that happens to be Catholic. They don't even count that as a private school. They're calling that a public school and giving it money to operate. And there is a lawsuit over that, and we'll see how that goes. But that is happening right now. And the moral of the story is taxpayer dollars should never be used to prop up religion. But instead of giving that money to churches, conservatives found a way to give it to religious schools while destroying legal precedent along the way. None of this makes life better for public school students because these laws are not meant for them. Vouchers are nothing more than gifts for rich people who don't need the financial help. And religious schools, it's a gift for religious schools that would not be popular enough to exist on their own. And this all has a ripple effect throughout those communities. And by the way, you know what's going to happen. Public schools are going to get worse in these states. And then conservatives are going to be like, well, we can't support public schools because they suck in our state. Let's give more money to the private religious schools. Like, you could see that slippery slope happening in real time. And the people who live in these religious bubbles just don't care about life outside their bubble. They are so willing to let others suffer in the long term as long as they can benefit in the short term. All right, I will take some questions here. That was an annoying story, wasn't it? In Arizona, vouchers started as a way for parents to place students with educational disabilities, most often autism, in private special ed schools. Yes, it was. And now it's run rampant. Yep. And now it's like, forget those kids. Let's just help Christians go to Christian schools. Why put them in the same space as heathens? Did you see Scalia's opinion where he made note of wanting to overturn gay marriage? He straight up said that non-Christian rulings make Christians appear to be bigots and get discriminated against as such. Yeah, was that the... no, it wasn't the Obergefell ruling. Yeah, Alito in the Dobbs case, or maybe it was Clarence Thomas in the Dobbs case, or something like that. But yeah, like, yeah, your beliefs make you look bad. That's how your beliefs work. If you don't want to be labeled as a bigot, you know what you can do? Stop being one. That never occurs to these people. They're so unpopular and they don't get why they're unpopular because, like, they're just following the Bible. It's like, yep, nope, that's not immunity from being a jerk. How do charter schools fit into the picture? Those are public schools and not private schools. So they're like independently operated public schools that have the blessing of the state, so to speak. But I would argue charter schools in a lot of cases also hurt public school students because charter schools can set their own standards for who they accept, and they don't necessarily have to take students with disabilities or educational disorders or students who are remedial or need remedial education. So, I mean, look, I taught at a public school for a number of years. I went to public schools my entire childhood and through college. So, like, maybe I'm biased, but also the data bears this out. Uh, I understand that not all public schools are great, but that's all the more reason we ought to be funding them better and raising teacher pay to bring in people who are really good at those jobs, because there's so often teacher shortages because that profession doesn't pay that much. So charter schools are not as bad as like private schools, but it depends on which ones you're talking about. And they're hit or miss. And that's also true of public schools. Also, collapsing society is the biggest threat. And there are some people who just want to watch the world burn and then they'll blame it on everyone but themselves, right? Yeah. Thanks for being here. Like and subscribe. My newsletter is right there. You can subscribe free of charge, though you don't have to. You can become a subscribing member of that as well, but you will get my articles every morning on weekdays as that happens. All right. I'm going to jump to a different story. I only have a few more here, but these are less politics ish, I guess. Yeah, let's talk about Southwest Airlines. So there is a lawsuit involving Southwest Airlines. It has been going on for years. It does involve religion. We'll get to that. But they were back in court this week. And a year ago, the reason they were back in court this week is because a year ago, a Trump appointed federal judge ordered lawyers for Southwest Airlines to attend 8 hours of religious liberty training from a right wing hate group. And they had to pay nearly $1 million to a Christian employee who claims she was fired because of her faith. And this week, Southwest lawyers were back in court saying, hey, judges, can you like overturn that? And I don't remember if I talked about this on the show because it happened a while ago, but I want to talk about it now again, even if I talked about it before, because this case is bananas. All of this started in 2017, and it involves a flight attendant named Charlene Carter. And basically, she was fired by Southwest because she began posting anti-abortion messages online, or at least that's what the articles about this case tend to say. She was fired for posting anti-abortion things on Facebook, things like that. That's so minimizing what she actually did. What she actually did is she started like DMing the head of her union. She's very anti-union, but she's part of it because that's how unions work. So she started like DMing messages to the head of her union because the union head attended the Women's March in 2017. And she wrote things like, you truly are despicable in so many ways. I want to show you this from the lawsuit. Southwest letter said that the March 7th, 2017 fact-finding meeting about all this stuff. Yeah. What did she send on Facebook Messenger? Southwest letter also stated that when Carter posted the videos and pictures on Facebook, not only did she send these damning messages to the union president, she was identifiable as a Southwest Airlines employee and represented the company in a manner that is disparaging to the flight attendants as well as all employees. Southwest characterized her Facebook post as highly offensive in nature, and the private messages sent to the union president were harassing and inappropriate. This woman was like baby reindeering her union president, saying like, you're doing horrible things, you're murdering babies, things like that. just never letting go of any of this. And then when she was posting publicly on her Facebook page, she was like clearly wearing her uniform as her profile picture. So like everyone knew, oh yeah, this is what the Southwest employee is saying about abortion. So she says she was fired for her Christian beliefs, as if this was religious persecution. Southwest is saying, no, we don't care what your religion is, but you're harassing the union president and you're posting this stuff while wearing your uniform and badge. You can't do that. It's kind of like a pastor who says like, oh, they are trying to restrict my free speech. I can't tell people how to vote. You are allowed to have political opinions that you share in a private capacity. If on your personal Facebook page, you want to have all the dumb opinions you want, you're allowed to do that. But when you step foot into the pulpit, you're not supposed to endorse a candidate. It's not hard to tell the difference. When you work for a company like Southwest, or when public school teachers have opinions, guess what? They do. If public school teachers have opinions, they're allowed to have them on their private Facebook pages. What they cannot do is say, like, yeah, I work for this school. And by the way, as a teacher, this is what I say. You're not supposed to like post your teacher badge alongside your horrible ideas. So this is the dilemma, right? This lady says she was fired because of her religious beliefs. Southwest is like, no, you were fired because you broke all the rules and you're a crappy employee. So she also then files a grievance with the union, and the union gets an arbitrator to look into this. And guess what? That arbitrator says, yeah, we're siding with Southwest here. And I know there are problems with mediators and arbitrators who like are hired by the company to do the fact-finding stuff. I'm not defending the practice necessarily, but if you look at the evidence, it's like Southwest wasn't religiously discriminating against this woman. But after all this happens, this flight attendant decides to sue Southwest Airlines and her union. And here's what was shocking about this. Shortly after she files that lawsuit, this case gets in front of a jury, and the jury says she's right. This was religious discrimination. And I don't know what all the details were in that case, how you get from what she did to its religious discrimination, but that's what the jury decided. They said that Carter needed to get her job back. I will actually show you this. She needed to get her job back, that Southwest had to stop discriminating against people on the basis of religion, which, again, they were not doing. And they said, oh, I'm sorry. I want to make sure I get this right. They said Carter needed to get her job back. Southwest has to stop discriminating against employees on the basis of religion. And the company has to notify its flight attendants of Title VII's prohibition on religious discrimination. But that wasn't all. Let me show you this. This is from an article from CBS News in 2022. A former Southwest flight attendant who was fired after sparring with her union president over abortion and other issues won a $5.1 million jury verdict against the air and the union. And if you look at the next paragraph, it said Southwest had to give her $4.15 million and the union had to give her nearly $1 million. So that's infuriating for all the reasons. And again, this is a jury verdict. They found in her favor. Southwest can appeal it, and they did. Okay, fine. Now, I will say, not long after that, a judge took that ruling and lowered the amount to $800,000. That is where we are at today. But here's the thing. This is kind of a side story, but I still think it's relevant, and I really want to talk about it, so we're going to talk about it. Southwest was supposed to tell its flight attendants that the company may not discriminate against them due to their religious beliefs and practices, because that's what the jury decided. And that future tense is important. Southwest had to tell people, we may not discriminate against you because of your religion. When Southwest sent out that memo to all of its employees, what it said was Southwest does not discriminate on the basis of religion. As in, we don't currently do that, but who knows what we're going to do in the future. And they also did not mention Title VII in their notice. So technically, did they follow the jury's instructions or the judge's instructions? Not really. So guess what that flight attendant does? She's very mad because they lowered her amount to $800,000. She says, hey, judge, they didn't do what you said. Go after them. And guess what judge this gets in front of? A Trump judge named Brantley Starr. He is the U.S. district judge that oversaw this case. And last August, he issued a ruling on this. And basically what he said, I want to show you this. This is from his ruling. It's hard to see how Southwest could have violated the notice requirement more. And then I'm going to go back to that for a second. He then says, I'm going to give you examples of what you did wrong. And I'm going to offer you some modified historical and movie anecdotes to prove my point. Modified historical and movie anecdotes. For the movie, he's going to cite Lord of the Rings. For historical, you know what he went with? The Bible. You know, history. Here's what he said. After God told Adam, you must not eat from the tree in the middle of the garden, imagine Adam telling God, I do not eat from the tree in the middle of the garden, while an apple core rests at his feet. Or when Gandalf bellows, you shall not pass, the Balrog muses, I do not pass, while strolling past Gandalf on the bridge of Khazad-dûm. I've never seen the movie. I don't know how that's pronounced. What is he doing? He's trying to be cute, and all he's doing is showing us he's like a Christian nationalist who has no business being in this job. But basically what this guy does, this judge, is he says, Southwest, I'm holding you in contempt. You didn't do the thing I told you to do. So then this judge writes out a new memo, and he basically says, just copy paste this and send it to your employees. But because there was a chronic failure regarding your protecting religious freedom, he also said you have to go through religious freedom training. And look at this. This is incredible. This is what the judge said in that same ruling. Because Southwest's right to speak when implementing the court's injunction ensures a continued partnership in the future, and Southwest's speech and actions toward employees demonstrates a chronic failure, this stupid company doesn't get religious freedom, the court concludes that training on religious freedom for 3 lawyers at Southwest is the least restrictive means of achieving compliance with the court's order. The Alliance Defending Freedom has conducted such training in the past, and the court deems that appropriate here. And that last line is bananas. Because what he said is those lawyers need to learn a lesson. You know who should teach you a lesson? The most right-wing crazy group in the country. Why them? Seriously, why them? And he says later in his decision, don't worry, you don't have to pay the company for the training. Just pay one of their employees to come out to Dallas, where Southwest is headquartered, and just do it that way. See, minimal cost for all of you. But again, why Alliance Defending Freedom? They had nothing to do with this case. And what he said is ADF is one of many esteemed nonprofit organizations that are dedicated to preserving free speech and religious freedom. Nowhere in there did he explain why that group and no other group, because there are a lot of groups that have the bona fides. Did I say that right? Sorry, it's late. To do any of this, why them? There was a journalist, Chris Geidner, who wrote about this at the time. And he explained why ADF was wrong about why ADF was the wrong choice. ADF's lawyers, including Aaron Hawley, whose husband is Senator Josh Hawley, you remember Josh Hawley, the fist to the insurrectionist guy, are the ones currently litigating to end the availability of one abortion medication drug nationwide. They're the group behind the case about the woman who didn't want to make wedding cakes for same-sex couples. ADF is not an unbiased educational institution, nor does it pretend to be. The only relevant training its website discusses in the training section is a legal academy connecting like-minded attorneys in an effort to show lawyers how to effectively advocate for religious liberty, free speech, the sanctity of life, and family and marriage and family. So again, this Trump judge says Southwest lawyers are so bad at listening to what he wants them to do, he's going to send a right-wing Christian hate group, religious hate group, to run this training. Like, this is a group, by the way, that has argued sodomy should be illegal. They have spread lies about LGBTQ people supporting pedophilia. They have defended the forced sterilization of trans people in Europe. Like, bigotry is what they do. So what the hell are we doing here? And it was also a weird choice for that judge to make, because Charlene Carter, the flight attendant in the center of all this, she never said you need to get training from them, even if I'm sure she was on board with all of this. I don't even know what an ADF religious training session would look like, because there were no specifics offered, and their track record suggests they don't know what religious freedom is. Like, religious freedom is whatever lets conservative Christians do whatever they want, and whatever conservative Trump judges will let them get away with. So that was weird. So anyway, why are we talking about this now? I say 30 minutes later. Because earlier this week, lawyers for Southwest were in front of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, basically saying, you see what this judge did? Can you overturn that? Because it's ridiculous. And they argued that we shouldn't have to pay this woman anything, because there was no religious persecution happening to begin with. This is a story from the Associated Press this week. Let me show you this. Southwest argues it broke no laws firing Carter because she violated company rules requiring civility in the workplace by sending hostile and graphic anti-abortion messages to the union leader, who was a fellow flight attendant. Like, yeah, this isn't religious discrimination. They go on to say, her attorneys argue she made clear to management she sent the material because she was a Christian and an opponent of abortion. They say firing her violated federal law shielding employees from religious-based discrimination, and that Southwest and the union should be held liable for firing. The judge asked Carter's attorney whether any worker should be allowed to get away with harassing coworkers as long as it's cloaked in religious conduct or religious practice. And I love that question because it's saying, hey, so if you're Christian, are you saying you can break any rule you want and just say, I broke the rule because I'm Christian, and you think you should be able to get away with it? Like, that's a good question. I would like the answer to that, because that's what they're doing now. She's a bad employee. Her response is, well, I'm a bad employee because I'm Christian and I love Jesus. And the thing is, in this argument they made in front of the Fifth Circuit this week, Southwest didn't even bring up Alliance Defending Freedom or the religious training, but the thinking is that if they are able to overturn the earlier ruling that says they religiously discriminated against this woman, well, then they're not going to have to go through the training anyway. It would be a moot point. So, like, the focus is on saying, hey, appellate court, just overturn that earlier decision. I did appreciate that the Freedom from Religion Foundation, they filed an amicus brief about all this stuff because they have a vested interest in this case. And their attorney, Sam Grover, he wrote that it's entirely unprecedented for a court to force attorneys to attend training by an ideological group. And he wrote this at the end of this right here. This court has the opportunity to keep Pandora's box firmly shut. The court should seize this opportunity. And I think that's an important point to make. And again, I hope the Fifth Circuit says this contempt finding is unsupported and that there's no basis for punishing Southwest for how they handled this. And I did find it interesting. The Alliance Defending Freedom, actually, they issued their own amicus brief saying, look, we don't care who wins or who loses, but we all want you all to know that we can totally conduct religious freedom trainings. Like, saying we've been really good in front of the Supreme Court. So, like, why would you choose anybody else, especially when it comes to First Amendment issues? And they never mention that the Supreme Court has a right-wing supermajority stacked with other Christian ideologues like themselves. And they also cited in their brief, look, all these Republican senators love us, so you should totally allow us to do this training. Like, yeah, you got all the crazy ones on your side. That's not a good argument to make. So the bottom line for now for Southwest is that this case is now in the hands of different judges. I hope they just reverse the earlier ruling. I hope they don't make Southwest pay this flight attendant for her awful behavior because she doesn't deserve it. And in the process, they would also say you don't have to take training sessions from some right-wing Christian hate group because she was never fired for her religious faith. She was fired for being bad at her job and breaking the rules. But professional victims like that, they can never admit that they're the problem. All right, I'm going to pause there for a bit. Let's take some questions and then I'll get back to stuff. Isn't the whole basis of not allowing churches to endorse political candidates, going back to the last story, or tell people how to vote because they're tax exempt and thus government subsidized? Yes, that is the basis for not allowing them to do it. Again, pastors have a right to, as private citizens, you can tell people how to vote. You can post on your personal Facebook page, I'm voting for whoever. It's a Republican. What you can't do is go in your pulpit on a Sunday morning and say, hey, all of you whose job it is, my job is to tell you all how not to go to hell. Well, I need you to vote for this candidate I like. You can't do that because now your church's tax exempt status could be at risk. But again, that's not free. That's not a violation of free speech. That's not censorship. That's just saying if you want to keep your nonprofit status, don't tell people how to vote. That's one of the rules. I wonder, were the text messages not something the jury could see? Bizarre verdict. I will fully admit, I do not know what the jury in this Southwest case saw. I don't know if they saw the Facebook messages. I don't know if they saw the private DMs to the union president, or if there was some argument that it was all okay because she was doing it in the name of faith and or something like that. I don't know what the jury's deliberations were, obviously. And again, I'm not even saying the jury got it wrong necessarily, but based on the facts that I have seen, it certainly seems weird. So maybe the appellate court will give it a second look and overturn it. I hope that's what they do, because I don't like that the Trump judge took this in a different direction entirely. Imagine if a fundamentalist Muslim or someone repeatedly emailed and messaged the flight attendant telling her she's going to burn in hell or something worse for not covering her face. Yeah, I mean, this is the hallmark of Christian cases, alleged cases of religious discrimination. They will say, you attacked me because of my religious faith, when if the shoe was on the other foot or the veil was on the other face, everyone knows exactly what the outcome would be. It would never be acceptable if a non-Christian did the same shit. If a Muslim business owner said, oh, you're a Christian and you want to buy my products, you can't because it violates my faith for some reason. Everyone would be like, no, that's totally religious discrimination. But when a Christian does it, it's like, well, we have to protect that person at all costs. We're Alliance Defending Freedom, after all. The evangelical footprint Trump has left on the judiciary will be destructive for generations. Yup, he got to appoint more federal judges than any prior POTUS. We really need to expand the federal bench. Absolutely, we do, not just at appellate courts. We need to expand the Supreme Court. And again, this is my argument to any of you who are watching this who might be wishy-washy about voting for Joe Biden, and you have good reason to be. I don't love the guy, but I'll tell you what, I'm sure as hell going to vote for him. And if you have a Senate race going on, please vote for the Democrat, because if you care about any of this stuff, who gets to nominate Supreme Court judges? Joe Biden. Who gets to confirm those Supreme Court judges? Hopefully a Democratic majority. And if any of those things doesn't go that route, or, God forbid, Trump is reelected and Republicans take control of the Senate, it's only going to get worse because they tried it. They have a system like well-oiled machine now. They will only appoint like 14-year-old Christian fundamentalists to the bench from here on out. And I don't know. There are some Republican atheists out there who are like shitting all over Joe Biden. And they're like, I'm either going to vote for some third party or I'm going to vote for Trump for reasons. And it's like, okay, so why do you support putting Christians on the federal bench, because that is what's going to happen. I do not get the selfish version, the selfish argument to be made that I'm not in love with Joe Biden. He doesn't do everything I want, so I'm not going to vote for him. Well, then you're ceding the ground to Republicans to just control the judiciary for generations to come, even more than they already have done. It's just selfish. It's stupid. Just vote for the Democrats for this issue, if no other one. My God, up and down the ballot, but certainly for president and the U.S. Senate. Do you think the USA will ever have an atheist president? I think the better question is, will we ever have an openly atheist president? Who knows about the non-openly part? The answer is possibly. I mean, the way it would happen is not that this person would be out and proud about being an atheist. It would just not be a thing they talk about. For example, Bernie Sanders, I forgot what religious label he goes by these days. It's not atheist, but he is someone who very much does not talk about his religious beliefs. But he had a fairly successful attempt at running for president a couple of times. You know what I mean? That's the sort of person, if you had a candidate who is popular enough, that's how you would get an openly atheist president, because it's just not an issue that comes up. If you support religious freedom and you support, whatever comes with that as far as the government goes, I don't know why you need to bring up your atheism. So yeah, to answer your question, I think it could happen. Yeah, don't discriminate. Get the free newsletter. Do it. I'm going to close a bunch of tabs and then I'm going to get to this next story here in just a second. Give me one moment to exhale. You know what's fun? Highlighting a bunch of tabs and then closing all of them at once. It's not letting me do that. I don't know why. All right. There we go. I'm going to follow up on a story I talked about not that long ago. It's only been like a month or something, but there is a big update here. So I did want to bring it up. This involves an Oregon lawmaker named E. Werner Reschke. And he's a state representative in Oregon. And a couple months ago, he said atheists and Muslims shouldn't be allowed to hold public office, that you wouldn't want to see atheists or Muslims in public office. And something happened this week where they investigated his comments and they had the option of punishing him for saying these horrible things, that atheists and Muslims shouldn't be in public office. And they decided not to do it. And I'll get to that in a second, but I want to remind you of what this guy did. He made these comments in February, and it was during an interview with Jason Rapert, who is the Christian nationalist, former Arkansas legislator, who now runs a group called the National Association of Christian Lawmakers. And this Reschke guy serves as the Oregon chair for that organization. And basically, Rapert asked him a softball question about why Christians needed to get involved in government. And instead of just saying something boilerplate like, well, we have a spiritual duty to shape society or some crap like that, he argued that non-Christians were unfit for office. And let me play you that clip so you can remember what he said.
Tell people about why you think it's important that Christians should be involved in government and voting and be a part of the authority in our country. What drew you as a Christian to do it, and what would you tell those people that are listening today?
You just go back through history and you look at men and the struggles that they faced and the faith that they had. And those are the type of people that you want in government making tough decisions during tough times. You don't want a materialist. You don't want an atheist. You don't want a Muslim. You want somebody who understands what truth is and understands the nature of man, the nature of government, and the nature of God.
Yeah.
If you don't understand those things, you're going to get things wrong. And in Oregon, that's a classic example. We have a lot of people who are godless, unfortunately, leading the way, and it's the blind leading the blind.
Yeah.
So who should make tough decisions? You don't want an atheist. You don't want a Muslim. You basically need a Christian. He wasn't subtle about that. He doesn't think atheists or Muslims should be able to hold public office. Us, because we have no religion, and Muslims, because apparently they have the wrong religion. And he felt so comfortable saying that too, out loud, to someone like Rapert, probably thinking only Christians are watching us anyway. Now, obviously, the founders of the country felt otherwise, which is why the Constitution explicitly says you can't have a religious test for public office. But even if you make the argument that Reschke wasn't banning anyone from running for office, but rather just saying he didn't think non-Christians have the right sensibility for the job, it is still a disturbing thing to hear from a sitting politician. And again, I know we just played this game, but if a Muslim said that about a Christian, or an atheist politician said that about a Christian, that they shouldn't be in government because, they're too gullible, there would be an outcry in the media. There would be an outcry on conservative media. So at the time when he said this, the Freedom from Religion Foundation's political arm, the FFRF Action Fund, they sent a letter to him, basically politely calling him out on this stuff. And this is what they said: as a state representative, your duty is to support the state and federal constitutions and protect the rights of conscience of your constituents, not to promote your personal religious views, much less to Christian theocracy. Your oath of office has charged you with great responsibility over citizens, including those citizens who may not or do not share your personal religious viewpoints. You have shown that you are unfit for this responsibility. You should either apologize to all non-Christian and non-religious citizens of your district, or you should resign. Well played, fair points. So that's what they said at the time. They also pointed out, by the way, that some of the founders, the former presidents that he mentioned in that interview, Washington, Madison, Lincoln, they didn't share his faith, or at least the practice of it, which is a point you would think he would know. And it didn't take long before this guy started to backtrack. When Oregon Public Broadcasting did an article about this back at the time, look at this. Reschke told OPB in an email his comments have been grossly taken out of context. I just showed you the context. They were not taken out of context. When asked for more specifics about what he meant to say, if not that Muslims and other non-Christians are unfit to lead, he did not respond. And then this is what one of his colleagues said. I don't know how to pronounce this, but Case Jama, a Portland Democrat, state senator, I am disheartened to see one of my legislative colleagues express views contrary to American values, the Constitution, and our collective aspiration of building a more perfect union. Our ability to live and work with our fellow Oregonians who speak different languages, pray or vote different ways, celebrate different cultures is our strength. Which, by the way, that's how you talk as a politician. And how did Reschke respond to that? And this person went on, like so many, I came to this country for all these reasons. Yeah. Okay, what did he say? I believe Senator Jama is qualified to be a senator, as well as any other currently serving legislator duly elected by the people. Like, my God, this guy backtracks so fast. Okay, but then explain yourself, right? Why is your colleague here, who is not Christian, why is that one qualified to serve, but you said they're not qualified to serve? Which is it? Were you lying then, or are you lying now? You know what I mean? That's what was frustrating about this. Like, if you want to make an outlandishly stupid statement, at least have the courage to stand by your bigotry. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here. You don't need, I feel like I made a video about this back in February. You can watch that if you want. But he didn't learn anything from this. And this is the update I wanted to talk about. I don't think he's learned anything in the past several months, because there is a House committee that was tasked. The Oregon House Committee on Conduct said they were at least going to investigate this matter. I would hope, hey, if you're a committee on conduct, maybe make an example of this guy. Make it clear to the elected officials in Oregon that you're not going to stand for this, that it's not going to be okay. You are going to publicly shame them for this. So that committee met this past Monday to discuss their findings. And basically the question at hand is, did Reschke violate one of their legislative rules concerning harassment in the workplace? Was he creating a hostile work environment? And I watched this hour-long discussion on like 2x speed. But basically, there are 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans on this committee. And their discussion was that there was no proof that he has treated anyone differently, regardless of his beliefs. So even if he's anti-Muslim and anti-atheist, he doesn't treat the Muslims or atheists in the legislature any badly. And that's why 3 of those 4 committee members, including 1 Democrat, said, we can just throw this away. There's nothing to pursue. There was no violation of a legislative rule. And that is just infuriating to hear about. This is what one person said who investigated the matter. This is what they discussed, according to Oregon Capital Chronicle. Here's the investigator. Most of the people that I interviewed were at least initially offended by the comments that were made by Representative Reschke. Some had one-on-one conversations with him and were satisfied with his explanation, but there were only 2 people who indicated that the comments had an impact on their work at the Capitol. One person, who is Buddhist, said she absolutely sees an effect from his words. Representative Reschke's comment was offensive, and it will impact my working environment, and it will affect my interactions with him. Okay, so it sounds like you should punish this dude. And this is, who is this guy? Dan Knopf or something? He is one of the Democrat who was on this committee. I think he has been reflective and appreciative of the impact those words have had and the work that he has to do to continue to restore trust. There's lessons for all of us to learn in this. To me, what this reinforces is that we can be guided by our faith. We can be guided by our beliefs, but we can also be respectful of the faith and beliefs of others and how they guide them in our government. Oh, okay, I'm not reading the rest of that. That is Susan Collins level dumb. I think this guy understands what he did wrong. No, he doesn't. He's still a bigot. What are you doing? He hasn't learned anything. Reschke didn't show up for any interviews with the people who are investigating this matter. He didn't sit down with the committee. He hasn't apologized. He literally made one of his colleagues feel like crap and who doesn't want to work with him anymore. Like, why would anyone be insane enough to think, well, he learned his lesson? No, he didn't. He's still a bigot. Just because his comments were not directed at anyone in particular, and just because he made them before the legislative session began, which they seem to think was a big deal, it doesn't make them any less damning. And I think another part that's annoying to me about this is that none of this got a lot of media coverage, which suggests that if a Christian lawmaker slanders atheists and Muslims, that's just a normal part of our political discourse. And as we have seen over and over again today, if a Muslim or atheist said this about Christians, it would definitely not go unnoticed. And again, the hypocrisy of what he said is obvious. It's not that atheists deserve to be in government and that devout Christians cannot be, but it's that the argument suggesting atheists cannot hold office because they reject a higher power implies that religious believers are inherently responsible and obedient. And that's what Reschke was saying in that interview. But if we've learned anything from the past several years, it's that the politicians who wear their Christian faith on their sleeve are also often the most immoral, law-hating people in the country. They love making public proclamations about their faith and turning around and defending corruption and cruelty at every turn. Just look at what happened to Trump over the past couple of weeks and how Christian nationalists defended it to see an example of that. Like, in a more just world, what Reschke said, those words would hover over his head for the rest of his political life. Instead, now, because this House committee is like, let's just erase this and pretend it never happened, they'll probably just be forgotten. And next time we see Reschke, it's when he's running for higher office somewhere because no one had the decency to punish him over this. For what it's worth, neither Reschke nor Jason Rapert have said anything about this situation, which is odd because these are 2 guys who absolutely say whatever they want all the time. But I think even they're like, oh, we got everything we wanted. They're just forgetting this happened. Good. Let's not talk about it and call attention to it, and maybe no one will notice. I'll take questions. He was totally going to say we don't want a Jew, but then stopped himself just in time. You know, he was thinking it. I mean, he said non-Christians, basically, so you know where he was going with it. Oh, thank you for that donation. Hello from hell. Or Arizona, which is hot as hell. That is true. I spent a part of last summer in Phoenix, and it was over 100 degrees every day, and it was horrible. I am not going back this summer, but I hope you stay safe. I know the weather there is crazy. Oh, thank you for that donation. I love what you do. Keep bringing us great content. I will do my best. Thank you for watching. As a former Oregonian, thank you for properly pronouncing Oregon. I'd like to see how you get along. Oh, God. Willamette? Is it Willamette? I hope. Sorry. Maybe. You can let me know if I'm right. I have no idea. I can't wait to return to Oregon soon. I've been hiking in Washington, but I haven't been hiking in Oregon, and there's so much good stuff to see there. Yeah, sign up. Damn it, I got it wrong, says Robin. Sign up for free at Friendly Atheist. It's Willamette. What? No, it's not. I was right. Moving on. All right, I got one last story for you. Give me 1 second to pull this up. Willamette? That doesn't make any sense. Okay. This is last one. It's a follow-up to something I discussed a while back, but again, there was an update to the case, so I wanted to talk about it. And it has to do with my frustration with the ACLU, because I generally like what they do. Why would I not? But on one particular case, it's been very annoying. Basically, if you don't know this already, the ACLU has a long history of defending conservative groups. Yes, conservative groups when it comes to First Amendment issues. So last year, they announced that they were going to file a lawsuit on behalf of the Christian pseudo-historian David Barton and his ministry Wall Builders, which is the group he uses to spread lies about American history. I was almost more surprised David Barton accepted that help from the ACLU, but okay. And the ACLU is also working with the right-wing legal group First Liberty Institute. So two groups that have very little overlap, they both joined forces to help David Barton. And that's not the problem I have with this yet. But here's what they were arguing about. Their lawsuit said that Wall Builders wanted to place ads on buses in Washington, D.C. For example, I'm going to show you from their lawsuit. This is one of the things they wanted to place as an ad. Christian, that's painting of George Washington right there. Christian, to find out about the faith of our founders, go to wallbuilders.com. There was another one, same text. This is a painting called The Signing of the Constitution. And again, it's just an advertisement for his stuff, saying, you want to know about their faith? Let me tell you all about it. And there were also ads that were just like that. Oh, there are no pictures. Why am I showing you that? There were also those two images without the text, but just the link to Wall Builders. And what happened is all of those ads were rejected by the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority. The group that oversees the ads, they said no to all of them. And what they said is, we prohibit advertising intended to influence members of the public regarding an issue on which there are varying public opinions. And they also say your ads violate our guidelines, which prohibit ads that promote or oppose any religion, religious practice, or belief. So the Metro basically said, you're violating our rules. You can't do this. So the ACLU's argument is that the government has, and that's what the WMATA is, it's a government agency. You have no right to discriminate on the basis of viewpoint or from imposing rules that are not applied consistently. And in their lawsuit, they actually listed a bunch of ads that the organization, the Metro, I will call it, had accepted. Like, there were ones calling for term limits for Supreme Court justices. There were other ones that had to do with public policy matters. They also accepted ads advertising the Book of Mormon musical, which you could argue is semi-religious in nature. But the argument the ACLU was making is if you're allowing those ads, then you got to allow David Barton's ads as well. Okay, so the ACLU said, doesn't matter what we think about the ads, you got to allow it because the government has no business deciding which voices ought to be silenced. Okay, so on principle, the ACLU is right. This is not about Barton. This is not about his lies. This is about the selective enforcement of a government agency's rules. Okay. And in 2015, by the way, the reason they even had these rules in place is because in 2015, there was a group trying to put up ads featuring an image of Muhammad, which is forbidden in Islam. And they were trying to figure out a neutral way to say we cannot have that ad go up. That's why they placed these rules there in the first place. But the fact that some ads in those categories have slipped through suggested that their rules were not being equally enforced. But here's why I bring all this up. Because it wasn't about the principle, it wasn't about the lawsuit. It's the way the ACLU described David Barton in their press releases and in their lawsuit. And I'll give you an example of what I mean here. Look at this right here. This is from the ACLU of Washington, D.C.'s press release when they announced this lawsuit. This lawsuit was filed on behalf of Wall Builder Presentations, or Wall Builders, an organization advocating for Americans to understand their history and the important role religion played in the founding of our nation, which sought to advertise on the side of these buses. No, that is not what the organization does. They don't want Americans understanding their history and the role religion played in the founding of our country. They exist to lie to Americans about our history and pretend that religion played a role in the founding of our nation. Like, I don't mind the ACLU defending David Barton as far as the legal principle goes, but why are they using his propaganda in their press release? That's what I don't understand. And they did this in their lawsuit as well, where they said the plaintiff, Wall Builders, they wanted to advertise on these buses to promote its religious and educational mission, which is to inform the public about the role that the founders' religious faith played in the creation of the nation and the drafting of the Constitution. All of that is BS. No, David Barton purposely lies about those elements to trick gullible Christians into falsely thinking we were founded as a Christian nation. He's made a whole career out of distorting the words of the founding fathers and the Bible in defense of Christian nationalism and homophobia and bigotry. And I know a lot of you know this, but he's such a liar when it comes to this stuff that he claimed to have a PhD that he earned. That was a hoax. It was later revealed. He once wrote a book about Thomas Jefferson that was so full of lies that his Christian publishers they pulled the book from the shelves because they said, quote, there were historical details, matters of fact, not matters of opinion, that were not supported at all. And when a Christian book publisher is like, there are too many lies in this book, we can't sell it, like, you know things are bad because their whole business is selling the Bible. So that's how bad David Barton is. And yet, conservative Christians and Republican politicians still cite David Barton as an authoritative source of information because they know the sort of people who take them seriously. They do not care about honesty. Like, these are people who think Trump is telling the truth about everything. They just want someone to say with total confidence whatever they all wish was true. And if it happens to be a white guy who sounds confident, they will believe anything that person says. And so what about those paintings that I mentioned earlier, right? Like, even those paintings to an extent are lies. Let me show you this one again. This is that George Washington one. Well, Andrew Seidel, the constitutional scholar who now works with Americans United for Separation of Church and State, he wrote about this painting because what he said is that for all the painting's ubiquity, there's no historical evidence to support this tale. Because There was a story that the priest Mason Weems designed this story to portray a devout Washington, but historical facts tell us of a different Washington. He was a man of little or no religion, with a strong character that, had he been religious, would have prevented showy religious displays. Even if Washington was religious, he was exceedingly private about those beliefs, even in personal letters and papers. So this painting that suggests Washington was praying this way, it is simply not in keeping with Washington's character, right? Like, this is the sort of thing he does over and over and over, that David Barton does over and over. Warren Throckmorton just put out a podcast over the past few months called, like, The Jefferson Lies. He's covered David Barton for years. He couldn't believe the ACLU was doing this either. I think at the time, if I could find this right now, he was shocked that the ACLU was propagating this as well. This is what he wrote at the time. David Barton in Wall Builders obscures and reimagines American history. He doesn't want Americans to understand all their history. Sometimes he leaves out some of the history when he tells it, as when he left out part of the 1782 Virginia law when he wrote about Thomas Jefferson's record on slavery. Sometimes he makes things up. I'm going to scroll down here. Barton will even tell Americans that the Constitution quotes the Bible verbatim. It does not. Does someone who does these things really want Americans to understand their history? So if the ACLU must represent misinformation as free speech, then go for it. But must they lie to defend lying? Yeah, that's the point here. Why the hell is the ACLU going out of their way? And I do have a theory on it. I'll get to it soon. But I mean, I think I'll go ahead with that theory now. Why would the ACLU move forward and talk about David Barton's Wall Builders as if they have a genuine mission to educate the public, which they do not? And the reason is, if you're working with another organization, including Wall Builders, including First Liberty Institute, if you're working with them on a legal case, you're not all going to send out the same different press releases. You're going to work on the same draft, and then all of you are going to submit the same thing. You're all going to get like one quote from one member of your organization in the press release. And I think that's what happened in both the lawsuit and the press release, that they allowed David Barton or his lawyers with First Liberty to dictate how David Barton would be portrayed. And whoever is at the ACLU who signed off on that allowed those lies to stay in place. Like, why couldn't the ACLU say somewhere in there, we don't agree with anything Barton is saying. Barton distorts and twists this information all the time. However, it's legal to lie. And just because he's lying doesn't mean the Washington Metro can reject his advertising. I'm not saying they have to use that language, but why couldn't they say something like that? It's because his lawyers at First Liberty wouldn't have wanted that. So I'm guessing the ACLU just went along with it. But still, why aren't they pushing back in any meaningful way? That's the thing. They're allowing Barton's allies to frame him as a hero by doing this. Like, David Barton's going to go give lectures now where he says, even the ACLU says I'm educating Americans about our Christian nation history. Like, they're going to use that. That's why they get away with this. Okay, so why do I bring all this up? All this happened a while ago. The reason I bring this up is because recently, now, a U.S. district judge ruled on this case. And what the ruling was is that the Washington Metro has to accept and run Barton's ads. The ACLU won this case, which, by the way, as I said earlier, that's the right ruling. And guess what happened when the ACLU announced this ruling? Look at this. Once again, this is from this week's press release about this case. Wall Builders is a Texas-based nonprofit organization that seeks to educate the public about the role the founders' Christian faith played in the creation of the nation and the drafting of the Constitution. No, that's still wrong. Why are you still telling people that? Later on in this thing, you have an ACLU rep saying, we're pleased that this ruling moves us a step closer to ending the Metro's arbitrary censorship. In a democracy, the government has no right to pick and choose which viewpoints are acceptable. This case is about expanding everyone's freedom to express their views without unreasonable government interference. You know what? That quotation is fine. No problem with it. What does the First Liberty Senior Counsel dude say? Rejecting a faith-based advertising banner by labeling it as an issue ad while accepting other ads such as promoting a social justice school on Earth Day is clearly hypocritical, discriminatory, and illegal. I don't like, you could see the difference in the guy who knows what he's doing and speaks in a professional way and the guy who only speaks grievance and discrimination, a perpetual victim. But again, my problem is this up here. Why is the ACLU promoting David Barton as if he's a legitimate scholar who wants to educate people and not a professional liar who wants to lie to people in order to advance his own agenda? I don't get it. I don't mind the ACLU taking a neutral stance on David Barton's lies as far as the First Amendment goes, but they do not have to hold back on saying it's a lie. I don't know why they haven't figured that out yet. They have smart lawyers there. What the hell are they doing? Now, there are still some issues to be worked out with the Metro's policies regarding religious advertising, but this is a win, not just for the ACLU, it's a win for Barton. And you know what he's going to do with this? Here's my prediction. Barton is going to say with complete sincerity that even the godless liberal ACLU and a Barack Obama appointed federal judge agree that Wall Builders works to help Americans understand their history. And the thing is, he wouldn't be wrong. He would be mischaracterizing their statements, of course, but like, that's what he does. That's the core of his Christian beliefs, to lie, right? The core of his lies are always this like nugget of unfortunate truth, and then he spins that into something bigger. So the ACLU, again, they were right in defending him. They were right on the free speech grounds, and they were completely irresponsible when it comes to how they are talking about this in the public. And they did that months ago. And what was so infuriating is that even after they won, they're still doing it. Like, come on, be better than that. All right, I think I'm done. What questions do we got? I always get ads for the ACLU Drag Defense Fund when I'm watching Drag Race. I'm genuinely shocked David would even work with these people. Does he know their past work? I think he does. And I think if I'm David Barton, I would say, sure, I can get conservative lawyers to fight this battle. But if I have my ideological enemies fighting this battle with me, it actually looks good for me. So by all means, if everyone wants to support me on this, I'll take them all. I mean, that's a strategic decision as much as anything else, because it's not like David Barton's going around praising the ACLU for anything. So I understand strategically why all of these groups were willing to work together on this. By the way, that happens at the Supreme Court all the time when it comes to religious freedom cases. You will see atheist groups working with Jewish groups, working with Hindu groups, working with progressive Baptist groups. You know what I mean? And they're saying, we disagree about a lot, but on this issue, we are all on the same page. And for what it's worth, if that means anything to you, you should listen to us. So I get the strategy. It's basically the same as conservatives standing behind an surprisingly woke piece of work because they made one joke about the left. Yeah, it's kind of like conservatives saying, you know who said something really intelligent the other day? Bill Maher. Because Bill Maher is like a Republican who makes woke jokes now because he just flipped over to the other side a long time ago. But yeah, like conservatives do this thing all the time. We're like, even blank says we're right. And it doesn't matter if they're distorting it or if they're taking something out of context or whatever. They will take victories wherever they can get it. Weird question, but can you talk about One Girl Nation in a video or article? They're kind of old news, but they were a Christian girl group that promoted purity culture. I got to tell you, I am not familiar with One Girl Nation. I do talk a lot about purity culture and some of the YouTubers who do some of that stuff, but that one in particular, I'm not familiar with. The tour they went on was very heavy on purity culture, and I thought they would be something interesting to look into. They're like, I don't know what that means. They're a little mix, only terrible. I mean, I believe they're terrible. If they come up in the news, please send it along to me. I'd be very curious to look into that. Am I copyrighted? Like me personally, am I trademarked or something? I don't know what that means. I'm going to go ahead and say yes. You can't use my likeness and sell it on a t-shirt, but I dare you to try. Yeah, cool. That's it for this week. Tell you what, I am still planning. I'm going to be here next week at the same bat time, same bat channel. And after that, I'm going out of town for various reasons for like 3 weeks, and so I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this while I'm gone. I'm going to figure that out and get back to you on that. But next week, anyway, I will be here. Hope I can see you then. Thanks so much for joining me. Thank you so much to Den for helping out with all the moderation. Thank you to all of you for commenting. Have a lovely, warm weekend, especially if you're in Arizona where it's 197 degrees. Go to friendlyatheist.com and sign up for the newsletter because I was working today on some stuff for next week, and there are some crazy stories coming out next week, and I'll talk about them next Friday. Have a good one, everybody.